Welcome back to The Bottom Line. I am joined by Armen Hammer. Armen, how's it going?
Great. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you, especially because we are coming up to the kickoff of the CrossFit Games in just a couple weeks. And so now it is time to figure out exactly who we think out of this big field of competitors is going to make it to the live competition, the top 5 after this
So
online qualifier.
a very non-controversial episode then, Niki, right?
I'm really excited to pick your brain. You've been doing this for a long time, evaluating CrossFit as a landscape and the athletes and the competition. So I am so curious to know, on both the men's and the women's side, who do you think is going to make it out of this online qualifier and to the ranch?
All right. So I've got my top 5s and maybe a couple of flyers in each direction to
Okay.
depending on the programming. But generally, I think I'm going to stick to my top 5 pretty happily. So on the men's side, Matt Fraser, obviously. It would be crazy of me to assume that he's not going to make it. I think Patrick Vellner is going to make it as well. He's had a really good year of online competitions from the Open to Rogue Invitational. He's just done really well in that environment. BKG, who for some reason people just forget about.
But is consistently on the podium, everywhere, all the time.
Yeah, perennial competitor, always fighting for a podium spot, if not on the podium. The guy is also just getting stronger, which is really wild because that was always his biggest weakness, but he's been getting really strong recently, which is great to see. Jeff Adler, he nearly won the Open, which is not an accident.
Right.
There are some differences between how this online competition is going to roll versus the Open. He probably isn't going to get a chance to redo workouts.
Right.
But he beat Pat in the national championship. And I think...
Which is still, by the way, math that I don't understand.
Well, that I think is actually exactly why he might have a chance to make it to top 5, because when you look at Pat winning the overall when there's hundreds of thousands of competitors and Jeff winning the national championship when there's a much smaller group, it kind of shows you that depending on what types of scoring situations they go with, it could favor someone like Jeff and the field playing against Pat or something, right?
That's right, especially when you consider that we just found out that the competition in and of itself is only going to be 2 days long. There's only a certain number of events that you can have. So the scoring situation might favor a smaller pool.
I mean, I'd love to see 15 scored events, but it's probably more likely it'll be 5.
Yeah, sure.
And then my last pick on the men's side is Chandler Smith, because he just seems to be on just this trajectory to greatness. And I'm very excited to see it happen.
What type of programming do you think is going to favor your top 5? Are you looking specifically at the open style and the regional style stuff that we've seen in the past that has specifically to do a specific correlation to an online event? Or do you think that it's, mainly going to be strength based and so these guys are going, or, I mean, how did you arrive at this top 5?
Yeah. I picked it based off of historic performance. And if I was going to be programming the, online CrossFit Games stage, I would be using things more like CrossFit Games workouts, but I'm kind of betting on the workouts being open plus as opposed to games-ish.
Okay.
And I think when you look at open plus type workouts and type programming, it doesn't favor athletes like Fikowski. And I would love to see Fikowski make it into that in-person finals, because I think that is the exact environment that he would shine in. That's the type of environment where he'd be able to beat Matt.
Totally.
If he shows up in that top 5 in-person finals, those types of events are the ones that he's historically beaten Matt Fraser at. So getting him there is the challenge. And I don't know if I have the confidence in the programming to say, oh, there isn't going to be a workout with 100 handstand push-ups or 100 pull-ups in it. And just based off of the length of Fikowski's arms, a workout like that is going to be unwinnable for him.
Yeah, he's definitely holding it down for the tall guys, for sure.
And I think that's really where my picks come in. It's less about any of these athletes' maximal capabilities, because honestly, the difference here is very slight. I mean, these are all the best and fittest humans on the planet. I mean, and we haven't even talked about the women's side, which is arguably more competitive.
Yep.
And so, when you look at it, like, what's the difference that's going to make it? And I think really it comes down to what type of events are we going to see? And do you have confidence that those events are going to play into people's strengths? And I think just based off of my lack of confidence that we're going to see, games level programming, like something, for example, again, something Fikowski crushes at the games and regionals is rope climbs, and ropes not included in that list of equipment that the
Right.
athletes need. So I think there's something to be said about, flyers coming in and potentially making a splash, but I like my picks because they tend to do well in these very specific types of environments.
Let me ask you about some conspicuously missing names out of your top 5.
And there are a lot of them.
There are. Noah Olson gave a very strong running at games last year. Why is he not in your top 5?
I love Noah. I think Noah's games performance is more accurate than people give him credit for. He's always been a potential podium guy. He just never was able to put it together until last year. But I think he would probably be the first to admit that, this format of this season doesn't play to his strengths. Noah belongs on a competition floor with the crowd, with his competitors within arm's reach, with that rapport, going back and forth with his friends. And I think the format of the competition doesn't play into his strengths.
Okay.
And it's not about, again, it's really not about anybody's level of fitness or their capability, especially when we start talking about who I have to leave off the list.
I know.
To get to 5, it's really about the environment within which they're competing in and my confidence in the programming to play to certain strengths or not.
Okay. Let me throw one more conspicuous name out at you. James Newbury, who ended up in the top 5 last year at games.
Yeah. So James and Fikowski are like my 2 big flyers.
Got it.
I think, and this might be a controversial statement, but James might be one of, if not the fittest human being that has probably ever lived.
Yep.
And I think when you look at his body of work in terms of what he's been able to do in multiple types of competition, from his ability to just do that, his Ironman time, for example, was nearly competitive. Like, it was almost a very good Ironman. It was a good Ironman time. It was nearly a competitive Ironman time.
Like Kona style Ironman.
Like qualifying for world championships, almost that good.
Mm-hmm.
And he did it, as a CrossFitter. He does that stuff because he loves it. And to see his ability to sort of morph his body into competing at these very disparate types of events, and the fact that he's much, much cleaner into his like CrossFit bod, like he's looking jacked right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, Newbury and Fikowski are my 2 big flyers in terms of making a splash depending on the programming. And I don't want to take anything away. I love James. I love Noah. I love everyone that I couldn't list. I just have to pick 5. And, if you only pick the 5 that everyone else is going to pick, you're not going to be able to set yourself apart. So I think I can make a good argument that you have to pick a couple of people that nobody else is going to pick, or very few other people will pick, just to be able to make a different look.
I agree. And also, I will say that we consistently find people at the top of the CrossFit Games roster that we didn't think were going to be there year over year. There's some people you just know. You'd be crazy if you didn't think that Matt was going to win. But there's always some people that end up in the top 5 and the top 10 that you're like, all right, like, good for them. Like, that maybe I should have thought higher, or, put them in my top 5 earlier. So history has something to say to that as well.
Yes, that is very true.
Let's talk about the women. A much more competitive field, you say?
Very competitive field. I think I had a very hard time on the men's side leaving out, let's say, 4 or maybe 5 athletes that could potentially be fighting for those spots. On the women's side, it was like 15 athletes that I felt could potentially make it into that top 5 with good arguments that they'd be able to do it. So my pick is Tia Claire Toomey.
Obvi. Shocker.
Yeah, hard to believe. Sarah Sigmundsdottir, who I think over the past couple of years has shown that she actually does better in the open than she does in person. And that's probably something that she's working on in terms of like the mental edge that it takes to compete really well in person. But she does exceptionally well when it comes to being in her home environment. And
Right.
I think that is a really big advantage for her. And she obviously has the raw capacity to win the whole thing if she needed to. Cara Saunders, which
Yes.
is like it's like she's just a legend. You know,
Yes.
she's so much fun to watch. She has such a great story. Part of me is hoping for it because I know how fit she was the last time she was competing at the games,
Mm-hmm.
and that type of thing doesn't just go away because you have a baby. So, you know, she's had a very good 2020. She did really well in the open. She destroyed the field when she competed in person. She did the Rogue Invitational at like 1:00 in the morning for her,
Yep.
since it's done all at the same time. She's in it. And I really, really love to see that. Kristen Holta, similar
Okay.
to BKG in that
Yes.
she just kind of gets slept on by a lot of people. But her podium performance last year, just like Noah, it's not an accident. I mean, that is where she can compete to on any given year.
Right. Right.
And she's done really well this year. She did really well in the open. She did have a surgery over the off season, I think over the holidays. But when the last time I spoke with her, she said she was basically back at 100%. So
Awesome.
that's a dangerous Kristen Holta. And I think if you see the types of things, again, looking at my guess on the programming, I think it's going to be something way more open-ish than it is going to be games-ish. It's going to lean towards that like generally accessible
Yeah.
end of things. And I think that's the type of thing that Kristen Holta really crushes. And then
Okay.
my last pick is Katrin David's daughter.
Really?
She hasn't had a
Okay.
great year. She has
Right.
not had a great year. And I will be the first to admit it. But I think Katrin has the like eye of the tiger when it comes to no one believes in me. I'm in this room alone. There's no one around me to push me. And that's exactly where I want to be when I'm competing. And for her, I think for her, that's going to be the sort of flicking the switch, right?
Yep.
And I think she has the potential to really thrive in this environment that a lot of other competitors are going to suffer in.
I think that some people would ask, don't you think that her run at the podium, competitive days like that, are a little bit behind her? That we haven't necessarily seen her in that position as much recently.
I I'm not a I'm not gonna I don't I would say very few athletes I would be a fanboy of and therefore forgive, you know, past competitive performances, right? And I don't think Katrin is someone that I'm just forgiving recent competitive performances. I think that she is clearly a CrossFit Games champion.
Oh my
You know,
God, of
two
course.
two titles doesn't happen accidentally. I think she's clearly an athlete that fights for a podium spot. I think she's had a couple of bad years,
Yeah,
but Sarah has had a couple of bad years too.
absolutely.
And I think I would say Katrin is a much more consistent competitor than Sarah is. I mean, when you look at just looking at 2019, for example, it wasn't really going Katrin's way. She had one last opportunity to make it into that final set, and she did everything she could to get there, and she was able to successfully make it happen.
Totally.
So I think that's the Katrin that we all know and love. And even though she hasn't made it, you know, back to the title spot, you know, since I believe, what was it, 2016 was her last title, because that 2017 was when Tia started winning, I
Right.
think.
That sounds
Um,
right. Yes.
yeah, I think 17, 18, 19. Yeah, this will be Tia's fourth. Um, I think you know, when you look at her ability to fight for a top 5 spot, it's absolutely in the cards. I think
Mm.
regardless of programming. And you know, she may not have had a really great 2020, but I would not want to count her out.
Let me ask about some conspicuously missing names from your list here.
There are
Though
a lot.
there are a lot. There are actually way more in my head right now. I'll try to keep my questions relatively short. The first one that comes to my mind is Carrie Pierce.
Yeah. So my two big flyers, the sort of underdogs are Carrie Pierce and Haley Adams.
That was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
explain,
sorry to get ahead of
explain.
you.
No,
Sorry
no,
to get
no.
ahead of
Those were the two I was going to ask about if I could only pick two.
I think, uh, I think Carrie really excels at games programming. Lots of handstand push-ups,
Yep.
lots of upper body strength and endurance, lots of gymnastics stamina. She's kind of like this D battery. She's like
Yes.
small, jacked, super strong, goes forever. And that is the type of thing that I don't think we're gonna see in this like type of programming. I don't think we're gonna see the things that are going to play to her strengths. Like, hey, you know what? Maybe we're gonna see a repeat of Mary. If we do, I'll eat my words.
She's
Carrie
got it.
absolutely will have that for
Yep.
sure. But I think it's less likely that we see that happen. I think it's more likely that we see other things show up that other athletes might excel at a little bit more. And with Haley Adams, she is the future of competitive CrossFit. I mean, there's
Absolutely.
no doubt about that. She's young, she's hungry, she's talented, she's very committed to training, and she's surrounded by excellence. But like Haley, her performance last year was exceptional. And it's really hard to see if that's going to happen year after year after year at that age. And I'm not saying that, oh, this is just a peak or she's due for a correction. I think it's more like she really did exceptionally well last year because nobody saw her coming. So she was flying under the radar every event. And I don't think it's an accident that she did really well at the first handful of events, because those are the most Rich Froning-esque workouts that you possibly could have seen programmed. And it's not like she's constantly doing only Rich's programming, but legless rope climbs, running, and squat snatches, followed by volume kettlebell shoulder to overhead and handstand walks, is the most Rich Froning couplet like set of workouts that you could think of. Like the only thing missing there is
CrossFitiest CrossFit.
the only thing missing there is maybe like burpee box get-overs, which is another like Rich Froning classic. But the thing that Haley would need, I think, in order to be able to repeat that performance is human competitors right next to her. And
I
don't know.
The only reason why for me, that would be the one, like swap her into your top 5 would be because I know an unfair advantage, because I just interviewed her for my podcast a couple of weeks ago. I know that she is like obsessed with getting to that level, to the point where she will train alone and she will do the thing. And she's the one being like, Rich, do this with me. Like, come on. When other people are like, no, we're done, we've trained, whatever, she's the one to be like, no, other people are training still, so I can't be sleeping on them. Do you know what I mean? I feel like she has that mentality. So were she just, at her age and just had the games experience that we knew that she had as an individual alone, I would say the same. I don't know if year over year that is something that she could do at her age, but given her experience as a teen in that environment as well, I don't know. That's the only one where I'm like, maybe I'd throw her into your top 5.
I think there's really good arguments to be made for a lot of these women and the men as well. There's just really good arguments. The fact that you're cutting to 5 means you have to leave legends on the floor. Like there are going to be true, historic legends in the CrossFit Games history who will not make it to the top 5 just because of how it pans out over the course of those events.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, like, if one of those workouts is a max squat clean, Haley's out.
True.
Right.
True.
But if one of those workouts isn't, it's instead of the max being a squat clean, if it's, let's say, I don't know what she's exceptionally good at. Maybe a jerk. She might be competitive with a jerk. She might be competitive with a deadlift. If something like that is the one, because we know that there's going to be a 1 rep max. If that max doesn't play to her strengths, then that alone is what's going to keep her out of it, even if she does really well in the other events. And that's the thing. It's like with very little information, making a call is a challenge. And I applaud you for making, you're like, you know what? Well, I know something you don't because I just talked to her.
It's not even that. It's that the way that you know that Katrin has sort of like the mind of a leader in that respect. I believe Haley has the training mentality that would also get her into that spot. And all of those athletes have something about them that is like, they don't give up, or they're comfortable in the pain cave, or they don't care who's around them, or they do care who's around them, and they can use that as an advantage. Everyone has their own thing. But I do believe that she has, at least in this last year, being in Tennessee and around the Mayhem folks, like developed that sort of training mentality that is like, I gotta do more. I gotta do more because I gotta get there.
What if that equipment list included a pegboard or ropes or rings? My list would be almost completely like 60 to 80% of my top 5 on each direction would be different. It's like it's really wild, especially on the women's side. I think especially on the women's side. But yeah, I texted Rich after we found out that it was gonna be this 2-day competition. I was like, hey man, you have to do these workouts.
Oh
like,
my God, no way.
Have to. I was like, I don't care. Like, you have to do these workouts. I understand that you're out, your hat's not in the ring. No one is expecting you to step back in and compete, but you have to do these workouts. And at the very least, just to be a rabbit for Haley, you have to do these. He's like, yeah, if I'm feeling good and the workouts are released, like, I'm definitely going to get after it. And I was like,
Crazy.
you better get after it. And it's like, I don't know. Maybe the rules are going to allow some training partner to show up, but right now it sounds like they're going to have to do it all alone. And in that situation, like, maybe when they announce the workouts, they might give them a couple days heads up, and Rich just like bangs them all out in one day and is able to give her some useful notes. But I don't know. Haley's a very, very convincing argument in including her in that top 5 for sure.
The one thing that I think is really interesting that you said is that these are going to be absolute legends out on the floor by the time we get to the finals. And I think that's a really important note, because we've oftentimes said that 2020 is going to have some weird asterisks on it. And I respect that, because how we picked the competitors for this first stage, how we had to cancel half of our sanctional events, and how we had to like go back on some invitations, and like, it's been so weird. So everyone has said like, this qualifying field is small and strange, and 2020 is always going to have that little like, yeah, you won 4 times in a row, but is it really a 4th time because it was 2020 and that was a weird year? I do think it's very important to recognize that the people who end up making it there are still the fittest on earth, regardless of how we got here.
For sure. And, I was more leaning towards asterisk year 2 months ago, when it was going to be, all right, well, we're going to try and hold the top 30, and it's going to be in NorCal. And if you can make it, thumbs up. And if you can't, thumbs down. Or even when there was talk about athletes boycotting the games. Mm-hmm. I mean, at that point I was like, it's a wash. If the field doesn't show up, you can't just backfill up. Right. Like, there's a reason these are the people that we've picked. And so, now that we're in a situation where it truly seems like the best of the best are being tested against one another, I don't think that there's a good argument, unless somehow the programming is just garbage, which when has it ever been? I mean,
0 times.
Dave's definitely missed. He's definitely laid a couple stinkers. I'm looking at you, softball toss, but that's very unlikely to show up at this stage, at this maturity of their, ability to test these athletes. So I would say that, at this point, I don't see a situation in which you can argue that this is an asterisk year.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you and I could talk about this type of thing all day long, all day, but so much speculation and so much still yet to learn about the way that this particular season is going to unfold. So we'll cut it there. Otherwise, we'll never stop. And Armen, thank you so much for joining me on The Bottom Line. We will see you guys next time.
My pleasure, Niki. Thank you.